So we're with Anouk Lori, who's the co-founder of NoCamels and journalist and a lecturer of IDC. So, Anouk, how did you choose to be a journalist?
Well, I chose it as quite late. I first actually chose to become an actress when I was a child, and I did, as a child, I did a lot of commercials, and I was in theater. And then when I turned 18, I thought to myself, you know what, theater is wonderful, but it's not intellectual enough, and so I want to do something which is completely intellectual. And so I'm going to go into law, and so I went to study in law school in the United Kingdom in London, and after I finished my degree, I realized that while it had been very interesting, I really missed the creative side, and I thought, okay, so what can I find that both combines between my creative side and my much more kind of like applied theoretical, I wouldn't maybe say intellectual, because theater can be very intellectual, but kind of like the more theoretical side of myself. And I realized that journalism was a perfect middle ground, in the sense that you really have to think before you write anything. You have to do a lot of research. You have to go through any subject that you write about and really understand it, like you would any kind of like legal text. But then you have to exercise your creativity when you sit down and you write, because you have to write, and as opposed to a legal text, you have to write it in a way that will interest people, that will draw them in, and that will make them want to read further. So I realized journalism was probably the right middle ground for me, and I've done it ever since, and I really enjoy it.
Great. So, is there any standards that you keep as you write and edit your articles?
Right. Well, for a while, I worked as a journalist, as a writer, at CNN and at the FT, and I freelanced for a few other places. Right now, I primarily do editing, so I co-founded NoCamels.com, and we have many writers and many articles every day, and so I'm primarily editing now. But no matter whether I'm writing or whether I'm editing, I think the standards are the same. People always ask journalists, what are your standards, etc. I think no matter what journalism you do, no matter where you are in the world, it's very basic. It's about understanding your story, about understanding whether there are opposing views in your story, and then conveying it in a way that is both eye-opening for your reader, in a way that is fair to the subject. So trying as much as possible not to have a very narrow-minded view, but to kind of have an open-minded view, and to cover all the aspects. And finally, once you've been fair and objective, is to make it interesting. So I think that's the final step, is writing it in a way that's interesting. I think that's also a duty to our readers, not just to give them the objective facts, but also to say, this is why it's interesting, to add some color, to add some life to the story.
Can you give a little bit of example?
We write a lot about, we write about Israeli innovation, and so we cover a lot of startups. So when we cover a startup that we think is really cool, the kind of first impulse from the writers is to write about why this startup is so cool. And I always tell them to take a step back, and to also ask the harder questions, such as, are there other startups that maybe do something similar? Have there been other startups that have tried to do something similar and failed? is there a strong team behind the startup? Do they have funding? Are they thinking about the future? Do they have a good business plan? I mean, I think it's very easy to jump on an idea and say this is an amazing idea, but the role as a journalist is to say, okay, is it just an idea, or is it an idea that is on its way to becoming something really real and something big? And the way to find that out is to ask the hard questions, such as, where does the funding come from? Where are you going to to assign the funding? When are you planning on becoming profitable? How many users do you have? And all that stuff that makes an article, that puts it in perspective, and not just to become really excited about any idea, but to have a balance.
So you're having a lot of perspectives, not only from the optimistic view, but also critical parts, so that people have a good knowledge of the startup.
Absolutely. I think the critical part is the most important in a way, because we write about so many startups. If people just came on our website and read about this startup is amazing and this startup is amazing and this startup is amazing, it doesn't give the reader anything in terms of differentiation between those startups. Whereas if we say, this startup has an interesting idea, however, it has been tried before, and others have not succeeded, or this startup is doing something cool, but to be honest, there is already a startup like that in New York or in Korea, or it allows the reader to understand what are the chances of this startup to actually create something extraordinary. Same with medical research. It's very easy to get very, very excited about a research into, let's say, I don't know, lung cancer, a research that is very, very promising, or a study. It's much harder to ask the hard questions of, so many clinical studies never actually afterwards go onto the market. What is the difference between something really exciting and something exciting that is actually going to be there on the market to benefit people? And we don't want to write about every single research as if it's going to cure cancer, because then we lose our credibility, and the industry loses its credibility. So we have to put everything in perspective.
So you mentioned the role of journalists, and can you give a message to the journalists?
I think, well, I personally, I don't like giving advice, because I'm still learning myself. I can obviously give advice and guidelines to the writers who are writing for NoCamels, because we have very specific guidelines. But I think very often it's presumptuous to give advice to journalists around the world. I mean, there's so many different types of journalism. There's so many different ways to do journalism. I think if there is one thing, like I said in the beginning of the interview, is that the basics really are the same no matter where you write. Whether you write about education, or whether you do something about politics, or whether you write about innovation, the basics of journalism are and have always been the same, which is to be fair to your subject, fair to your reader, and to try to just open the eyes of society, and not try to put yourself in the role of telling others what they have to think, but to allow them, to give them the information so that they can make the decisions as to what they think for themselves.
So can you share one of your stories that you had difficulties in your life and how you overcame it?
Personally, how I had difficulties in my life?
It could be anything.
You have challenges every day. You can, I think that I was thinking about that the other day. How like on social media, people always put the best pictures of themselves, obviously, and you see people, they take pictures when they're with friends and when they're on vacation. So it looks like, social media is kind of creating this reflection of society that is very, very happy and content. And because obviously, when you're kind of like waking up in the morning in a bad mood because you don't want to get to work, you know, that's not when you're going to take a picture of yourself. Or when you're, I don't know, missed a flight, that's not when you take a picture of yourself. People take pictures when they're in a good mood. And so, you know, I realize my profile is like that as well. I look happy and optimistic all the time, and I try to be a happy and optimistic person. And I think that a lot of the time I succeed, but, you know, life isn't like that. Life isn't like Facebook. Life is challenging. Every minute has its challenges. And so I think that, you know, how I have overcome some of my challenges, and I'm still working on that, is just to accept that there are challenges. Not to always try to overcome them, and not to always try to fight them, and not to always try to say, you know, I shouldn't have any negativity in my life, because that's part of life. And so to accept my challenges and to learn from them, and I feel like so blessed every day that I get to like spend another day having learned from past mistakes and making mistakes today and learning from them tomorrow. So again, it sounds like a, you know, it can sound like a superficial soundbite, but some of those seemingly superficial sound bites are very often actually, I think, the grounding truth, and that's that, you know, accept the challenges, learn from them, and smile as much as possible.
Wow. So, to finalize, what is your vision of your life?
What's my vision of my life? You know, I have no specific vision beyond envisioning that I want to learn as much as possible every day. Like, I am a voracious learner. I love to learn about everything. And I've never been one of those people who has a specific vision where I know where I'm going to be 10 years from now, and I know that 20 years from now I want this and that, you know, and there are some people like that. My husband is like that, you know, he's on a path and he's going to follow that path. I don't know what tomorrow is going to happen, you know. I mean, I hope I'll be at NoCamels, but you don't know what's going to happen. Maybe I'll be interested in something else. You know, I'm interested in so many different things, in journalism, but also in art and history and just, you know, archaeology. I love so many different things that I just hope that every single day will bring me knowledge. And, you know, if I jump from like one profession to another, then I think that's fine, as long as I feel like I'm learning. To me, that's the most important.
Wow. So is there any habit that you have because you love to learn? Like maybe could be reading a book, or you scrap all the...
I have a very bad habit, which is to and it's happened in the last couple of years, where it's a bad habit, and it's unfortunate, where I don't finish any book that I read. I kind of read half of every book, because every book that I read, I realize, okay, you know, this is only going to give me information about this subject, and, you know, a week later I'm already fascinated about another subject. I have to learn, I think, to be a little bit more focused for the time that I'm reading a book. But the thing is, you know, some people love thrillers, or some people love, you know, biographies, or some people love history. I'm interested in everything, maybe except for, I don't know, mathematics. I would love to be interested in them, but I think I maybe don't have the capacity to understand it that well. But I'm interested in so many different things that I kind of like jump from one thing to the next a little bit too fast.
I think that could be one reason that why you like innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Innovation is something that changes every day, and the pace is so fast. It's like I can never catch up with one thing before, you know, it's already moved on to the next thing.
Wow. So, is there any last word you like to transfer?
Last words. Well, I want to thank you for doing this interview. I've never done a video interview like this, and that's it. I'm very happy to have done it.
Thank you so much for having this great conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I look forward to seeing that and more of the stuff that you do.
Wow, great. So thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.